Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's daf, which is SUKKAH Tes Zayin. Perhaps we'll start again from the 2 dots down to Svav Amid Beis, 4 lines from the top. So we have a bed frame which came apart. Now the bed frame consists of 2 long posts, 2 short ones, and of course 4 legs. Mishnah speaks about this fellow using aruchos hamita, the long bedposts, as SUKKAH, and the Mishnah considers them to be SUKKAH pasal. Lema masayeh le Rabbi Ami bar Taviyumi. Perhaps this is a riot to the shita, the Amar Rabbi Ami bar Taviyumi. Sichacha bevloi kelim psula. If one uses worn out garments, that's SUKKAH pasal, despite the fact that it isn't really a functioning kli. But since it originated from a kli which is pasal for SUKKAH, Chachamim disallowed even remnants of a kli, for it might lead one to use the actual kli itself. Likewise over here, we have the disassembled bed frame. Since it originated from a full bed frame, it's no longer suitable for SUKKAH. Perhaps it's a raya to that shita. It doesn't allow even bloi kalim, even remnants. And so the Gemara really isn't a comparison. Why? Because over here, perhaps this portion of the bed still has function, still has use, and is still considered a kli by its own right. Elsewhere, Rav Chanan bar Rebbe tells us, regarding a different Mishnah, but the concept is still the same, that we're speaking about a collapsed bed, but we have a significant portion of that bed intact, aruka, the long post, ushtei kra'ayim, with its 2 legs still intact, or biktsara ushtei kra'ayim, the short side of the bed with 2 legs, and therefore it's still considered somewhat of a kli and somewhat useful, as the Gemara will explain soon. Therefore, says the Gemara, perhaps over here, the aruchos hamita is not just a broken apart frame. Hachanami barucha ushnei kra'ayim, a long post with 2 legs intact, or biktsara, a side post, ushtei kra'ayim, with its 2 legs. Heiche itma de Rav Chanan amar Rabbi. Where? What did that concept apply? Ahadasnan, on the following Mishnah, mita amas chavila. A mita is mitames, meaning it can attract tuma only when it's chavila, when it's a bundle, when the bed frame is fully intact. Umitaheres chavila. Likewise, suppose the bed acquired tuma and then it fell apart. The only way to be toivel in the mikveh is by first reassembling that bed, so it appears like a bed, it's a fully functioning bed, and then you can be toivel it divrei Lezer. So the only way for a bed to become tamei is if it's intact, a full bed frame, serving in proper capacity, but broken apart, you can't become tamei, nor could you be matayr that bed in that form. Even if it's broken apart, it can still attract tuma umatayr sevar. Likewise, you can be toivel that bed, even though it's a collapsed frame. Well, what are we speaking when we say evarim? Completely collapsed, has no function, has no use. How can you treat it like a bed? Amar Rav Chanan, Amar Rabbi, aruka ushtei kra'ayim, katsara ushtei kra'ayim, was speaking that the portion of the frame still has function, it still has significance. It's the long post with 2 legs intact, or the short post with 2 legs. Lamai chazi. What is it suitable for? It's just a broken bed. Says the Gemara, you can still use it somewhat. Lemismechinu agudim. You can lean it against the wall, ulemeisa malayu, and sit on him, umishta ashli, by running some ropes across, meaning you can create some sort of improvised frame by using this portion of the bed, running it against the wall as support, and running some ropes back and forth. So it still has some function. And as Tosfos explains, although we're speaking about a bed which isn't really a clay kibul, he called it pshute klei eitz, it's still mekamal tumah, of course, because it's chazi lemedrasa, so Tosfos says, meaning a zav can sit on it, can lean on it, can lie on it, so it can acquire tumas medras. And that's the basis for the tumah here. apparently Chachamim hold, even though it's not the original bed, it's a broken apart bed, it's a collapsed frame, but it still has some function. It still has some shimush. Although not the ikar function, but some sort of improvised use it has. Therefore, the Chachamim maintain it still has its tumah, it still retains somewhat of its original shame, and we treat it like a bed. Rabbi Lezer disagrees. He says, even though it can serve you in some capacity, this is not the bed, this is not the kli in its original form, and therefore you can't have tumah or tahara in this format. Chachamim, however, Taisus explains on Tezvav Amid Beis, they hold that since you can reassemble it, and Taisus says, we're speaking that he still has the other half. It wasn't lost, it wasn't stolen. It wasn't stolen, so he still has. And only if he still has that capacity, he can reassemble two parts of that bed. So we treat it as though it's on its way back to being reassembled, and since currently speaking, it still can serve in some capacity. That's the point of Al-Gemara, it can still support on the wall and lie on it. That helps it retain its bed capacity. And since we're speaking about Tumas Medras, meaning that the bed is really serving the person, it's not on its own a kli, it's not a kli which is mekabel. The point of the Tumah here is because it's serving a person, meant to sit on it, to lie on it, so if it could still serve, it could still support a person any which way, Chacham maintain that it will still hold on to its Tumah, it will still be considered somewhat of a bed, and can become Tamei or Tair in its current form. That seems to be the essence of the machlokes in Rabbi Lezer, who requires a full-sized, properly designed bed, the original kli, the way it's meant to look. Chacham will say, look at function. It can still function in some capacity. It still retains its bed status. Gufa, let's go back to the halacha we mentioned earlier. Amar be'amir bar teriyumi, sichacha bevlai kelim psula. If you used worn-out kelim, that's chach pasel. Although it's not really a kli, not really mekabel tumah, it's exer d'rabbanan because it might actually lead a person to use the original kli itself. My bloy kelim, when we say worn out kelim, what are we speaking about? Says the Gemara, we're speaking about worn out garments, worn out material. Matlonias, little patches, little pieces of material. She'ein behen sholosh ala sholosh. We're speaking about has less than the required shear for tumah, which is 3 etzba'is by 3 etzba'is. These are smaller than that. Ein bahem sholish al sholish, chazyan, and therefore unsuitable. Loilanim, not for paupers. They wouldn't even hold on to this small material for a patch use. Loilashim, certainly not for wealthy people. Despite the fact that it has no use, it's totally useless. There's a gzera, don't use it as schach, because a person may actually use the kli, the original garment, the original piece of material itself. Tanya Kavasei Rabbi Ami bar Tovimi. We seem to have a right from a brisa to this concept. Machzelas shel shifa v'shel gemi. I have a mat made of these plants. Shiurea, you have the remnants of these mats. So it got worn down, and you only have a little bit left. Even though it's less than the shiur, which would allow it to have tumah. Rashi brings a Mishnah in Kalim. When it comes to a mapatz, a mat, you need at least shisha al shisha. It needs to be 6 by 6 tfachim for it to be ro'il l'kabel tumah. So here it's already worn down to much less than that. Ein mesachachin behen. They may not be used for schach, and that's a raya to the halacha we just mentioned, since originally it was a proper kli, and it had tumah capability, even though currently it's smaller than the size, and it's not makabel tumah. We don't want to use it to avoid confusion. The Brisa continues, Machzelas hakonim gedola. If you have a mat made of konim, of bamboos, of reeds, is that called a kli? Is it makabel tumah? Or do we say it designated perhaps for schach, and it's not a kli to be makabel tumah? You can use it for schach. Says the Brisa, you know what? It depends on its size. If it's large in size, we know it's not meant for sitting. It can be used for schach. It's not a kli, it's not makabel tumah. Rashi says, stoma l'sichach. Even though its intention and purposes is unknown, we assume large in size, meant for shade and shelter. Ketana, if it's a small-sized mat, ein mesachichin ba, it may not be used for schach because it's a small-sized mat, personal size. It's meant for sitting purposes. It's a kli. It's makabel tuma. Rashi says, stama. A stam is to serve a person, and therefore a kli is unsuitable for schach. It's makabel tuma. Rabbi Lezer Omer, his machmer, afi, even the large-sized mat, mikabel as tuma, ve'en masachachin ba, even a stama, even if it's unknown, purpose unknown, we assume that stama is shchiva. We presume that it's meant for lying, for sleeping, in which case it's a kli. As we said before, mita is mikabel tuma, and therefore it's not kosher for schach. Continues the Gemara. Hachoitet begadish. Okay, so now he's holding, by making a sukkah, he has a haystack, a pile of bundles. He's going to go carve out, hollow out the inside, and leave the frame, leave the skeleton intact. The Mishnah says, "Eino sukkah." You know why? Because it wasn't man-made. The schach was just left untouched. And we need a tasa. The schach has to be placed by a person. It has to be man-made schach for the sake of providing shade. Amar Rav Huna leishonu, you know what? This concern only applies if it's a solid haystack. Ela she'ein sham chalal tefach. You don't have in this haystack airspace, a tefach worth of airspace. B'meshach shiva, throughout an area of 7 by 7 tefach. So it's a solid haystack, and he's now carving it out to create some living space in there for a sukkah. That doesn't work. But suppose before he began carving it out, there was already some sort of gap inside. There was a chalal tefach. So when he placed his top layer of bundles, he had left a gap, an airspace of tefach beneath that. That's already a shear of oil tumah, as we learned back on the Yuram and Aleph. So if there was already a chalal tefach, an airspace of a tefach, b'meshach shiva, of course, it needs to be the size of a sukkah, meaning over an area of 7 by 7 tefachim. So you have an airspace, a tefach high by 7 by 7. Harei a sukkah, and it's fine to serve in sukkah capacity. Let's go over to Rashi, about 6-7 lines above our position in the Gemara. Ela she'en sham chalal tefach. The concern is only when there's no chalal tefach, goiva, meaning a tefach of airspace, b'meshach oirech v'rechav shiva, over an area of 7 tefach, keshir sukkah, v'ach kach higdish kol hagodish, al oisei chalal, the achshav nasa shem schach meila. There was no tefach of airspace, just a airspace less than a tefach, and then he piled all the bundles over that. The achshav nasa shem schach meila, in which case, now when he's carving out his haystack, schach is resulting. Right? As a result of his efforts, you have a shield, you have a shelter, you have a mesachich. Something which was not there before, because previously it was just a solid haystack. And that doesn't work because he didn't actually fashion that schach. It's just there by default. But if you have a chalal tefach previously, meaning when he piled up his bundles, he had left a small gap, small cavity inside, which has a tefach in height. That's the case. You already have shem schach there. You've created a shield, a shade provider, something hovering over that small airspace inside your haystack. And then when he continues hollowing out that airspace, enlarging that airspace, until he enlarges it and picks it up all the way up, gets it to be 10 tefachim high, so he takes it from 1 tefach all the way to 10 tefachim. That's not called the asiyah of the schach. What is he really doing here? He's enlarging the walls. He's making the walls higher. But as far as the airspace, it's the same airspace technically. Right? There was already an oil beforehand. He's just making things a bit higher. Ubitfanois le'amrinon tasev laminasi. Says Rashi, the concept of taseh is strictly related to the SUKKAH, up by walls. Rashi has an example. It's like the sukkah which was less than 10 tefachim high. We had back on the Dalet. And he carved out the floor and created a chakak, a pit, a dugout, which was mashlim the height to asar. That's fine. Here as well, says Rashi, if this haystack already featured a halal of tefach inside it, then the top layer of the hay was already serving in SUKKAH capacity, and that was manually made. It was man-made. So since it already has a shem SUKKAH, even though he comes in afterwards and enlarges that gap and picks up makes the halal higher and higher until it gets to 10 tefachim, he says, Rashi, that's a change taking place in the tefanis. The daifin is becoming higher and taller. But as far as the oil, it's really the same oil as before. The SUKKAH was already masachich before he began carving out and enlarging his gap. Interesting diak in Rashi, in the name of the Ran, you see Rashi, when he described this fellow being choited by, he says melamata lamala, starting from the bottom up. And the Ran actually has a different gerus in Rashi, melamala lamata, that he began on top and worked his way down. So he learns that the way his gerus in Rashi works, the only way to really do it is start from the top and go down. So he has a large haystack, and as we said, there was a halal tefach, meaning the top layer of that haystack was covering airspace of a tefach within the haystack. And according to the way he's gerus in Rashi, it's milamala lamata. The only way it works is if he extends the halal downward. So the sukkah, the SUKKAH, remains in place, unaffected, unchanged. And then he's modifying it by just enlarging the halal, extending it downward until he gets to 10 tefachim. But the Ram brings another pshat, which is milmata lamala, that perhaps it works the other way around too. You have a haystack with a halal all the way at bottom, with lots of material between the gap, between the airspace and the top layer of the SUKKAH, of his haystack. And then he's going to work his way up. Does that work? So he says perhaps yes, because even though he's really carving away from the SUKKAH and really modifying the SUKKAH, well, he says the entire layer, this entire material sitting on the halal is really all SUKKAH. So even though he's enlarging the gap and changing the configuration of that SUKKAH, that's okay. So he's thinning out the SUKKAH, but it's still the same SUKKAH, whether it's thick SUKKAH or thin SUKKAH. So here as well it would work. So either way, whether working your way down or working your way up, you already have your SUKKAH there, and that SUKKAH is man-made and it's kosher. So let's go back to the Gemara. Rav Huna tells us a chiddush. Choited begadish ain't a sukkah. Yeah, that's when it's a solid haystack. But if you began with at least something there, a halal tefach, then you can go and enlarge that gap and complete your sukkah. Says more Tani Rami Hochi. We actually have a brisa to support this. Choited begadish lasas le sukkah. Raise a sukkah. Brisa says carves out a haystack. It's fine. What do you mean? Vanantan ain't a sukkah. Our Mishnah says it doesn't work. El lashma mina. Apparently, the only way to reconcile this apparent stira could be Rav Huna. And the brisa which allows is speaking like Rav Huna. Originally, he had a halal tefach in this haystack, whereas our Mishnah speaking, it was a solid haystack, and therefore it doesn't work. Shema mina. Indeed, this is a raya to Rav Huna. Ika de Rami le Mirma. There were others who presented a different version of Rav Huna's halach. So instead of Rav Huna providing an explanation to our Mishnah, Loishanu, only in this case, but in that case it works, he was actually coming to answer a stira, the stira that we just presented. We have a Mishnah, Tana, Nachoitet Begadish, Lazas Sukkah, Eina Sukkah. On the one hand, we have a Mishnah, it doesn't work. On the other hand, we have a Brisa, Vatanya, Harezu Sukkah. Steps in Rav Huna, he says, there's a big difference. Amar Rav Huna like Kasha. The answer is, Kan B'Shiesham Chalal Tefach B'Meshach Shiva. The Brisa is speaking that there was already a pre-existing halal in this haystack, 1 tefach high, 7 tefach wide, a sheer sukkah, and he really came along to enlarge the halal. in which case the schach was already a man-made functioning schach. Whereas our mission speaking, there was no such halal, in which case there's a tasa v'lo min asi. Taisus speculates perhaps of huna l'shitasei. Back on Daf Yudam and Aleph, we spoke about the sukkah tachas sukkah, and the Gemara asked, well, how high is the top sukkah? How much airspace is there in the top sukkah for the bottom one to be considered sukkah tachas sukkah and puzzle? And Rav Huna was the one who provided the share tefach, because we find by a tumah that an oil of a tefach provides coverage, so we see that it has significance, and therefore says Taisus, perhaps here as well Rav Huna is following his way of reasoning that even though a tefach isn't really a makim sukkah, it's not really for dira sukkah, which needs at least 10 tefachim, but since it has some function, some significance, it is mishamish like an oil, that is sufficient as a starting point for your sukkah. And Taisus says perhaps even the other shittas would agree to Rav Huna in the context of our sukkah. Continues the Mishnah. HaMeshalshel defanis milamala lamata. Meshalshel means lower, lowering its chain. So this fellow is going to begin building his sukkah walls from the top, where the schach is going to lay. He starts from the top and works his way down, and runs out of material in the middle. He never got to the floor. If he's left hanging 3 tefachim from the aretz, that's beyond the lavud, allows the goat to get through. It's not serving as a mechitza, as a barrier, it's possible. But if it's within 3 tefachim to the ground, it's considered one and connected, and it's fine. What about milamata lamala? If he begins building from the bottom and works his way up, how far does he have to go? Once he reaches 10 tefachim, it's kasher. Rabbi Yossi Eimer, here's a chiddush. Keshem shemalamata lamala. Asar tefachim, just as we maintained that going upward 10 tefachim is enough. As long as the mechitza rises 10 off the ground, that is sufficient mechitza for sukkah. You don't have to reach the schach. Kach malamala lamata asar tefachim. Likewise, even if he's coming down, so he's starting from the top and working his way down, as long as he dropped 10 tefachim, that's okay, even though his mechitza is way off the floor. The Gemara will explain the reason for this. Let's go over to Rashi, around 7-8 lines up. Mas Nisan, says Rashi, Ameshalshel kol milamalu lamata korish shilshel. Milamalu lamata shehiz chalerig hamachitza is laschach. Begins weaving, forming his mechitza at the schach point, meaning at the top of the doifen, where the schach would typically lie, and then works his way down, and weaves his mat, his sticks, his bamboo, going downward. Shloisha tefachim psula. If he left 3 or more tefachim on the bottom, it's puzzled. There's no space for the goat to jump in unhindered. Damar psula. We know that's the shear beyond lavud. It's considered disconnected from the ground. It's not providing a machitza. However, mamata lamala, sheis chalereg malamata samach karka, began his weave, began building his walls on the ground. Umagbia va'ola. And he works his way up. Once he rises 10, even though he didn't reach the schach and the 2 pshatim in this halacha, the Ritva learns this is based on good asik. That you can sort of stretch your mechitza upward. If you have a solid mechitza down here with a shear of asarat tefachim, we view it as though it extends upward. It has an effect on the entire area. Right? It blocks out traffic on the bottom, and also it blocks out anywhere, meaning it's forming that mental barrier throughout the entire area. And we view it as though it extends all the way upward to the schach. That's the Ritva's approach. Good asik. Other Rishonim learn you don't need good asik here. 10 tefachim is enough. As long as the mechitza rises 10 tefachim off the ground and is situated below, directly below the schach, which is hovering above it, that's okay. Continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Eimer Keshem Shel Mata Lamala Daya by Rigas Yud. Just as from bottom up 10 tefachim is enough. Kach Malamala Lamata is a chiddush. Likewise, if you're working your way down, Daya by Rigas Asar 10 tefachim is enough. Vafilu Gvaya Har Min Haaretz. Even if it's way off the ground, it's fine. Because Sava Mechitza Tluim Asar Materes. He holds you have a suspended mechitza, which isn't really planted firmly on the ground. That's okay. You look up, you see, a mechitza. So it creates that mental barrier. I'm entering a new domain, even though physically it's not presenting as a barrier. So let's see the Gemara. What's the rationale behind the machlekes here? Tanna Kama says it has to be firmly planted on the ground. It can't be suspended midair. Rabbi Yossi says even suspended is okay. Mar savar mechitza tli materes. Rabbi Yossi maintains even a suspended mechitza works. It doesn't need to be firmly planted on the ground, because even a suspended mechitza creates that impression that beyond that mechitza is a separate entity. Umar sava mechitza tli eina materes. Tanna Kama maintains a suspended mechitza doesn't work. As the Chazon Ish explains, a mechitza needs to be something that relates to the makam, to the karka. It has to create a division, a barrier within the karka, within the makam, which is down on the ground below. Tanan Hasan, we learned elsewhere, Mishnah and Erevin, regarding a bar sheben shtei chatzeris, a well situated between two courtyards. So you have a chatzer on the right, chatzer on the left, with a kaisel, of course, a wall running between the chatzeris to split them apart. And you happen to have a well or a water pit situated right under that wall. Half is visible on this side, half is visible to the other chatzar, and they both draw water from that same well. Since it's a joint usage area, they cannot do that on Shabbos. They can't draw from the bar, which is a joint bar, over into their respective chatzar, which is a private area, unless they make an erev to merge together the entire usage area, and then it's one happy family. But otherwise, you're prevented from using that bar. They may not draw water from that bar, which is a makim shutfus, to their own personal chatzar, which is their own private domain, unless they constructed a special mechitza designated for this bar. So it's going to be within the bar itself, to create a heker, a separation, a recognition of heter, of heker, of separation, so that it appears that each one is drawing from his side of the bar. And now we're no longer accessing each other's usage area. So you have to create a mechitza within the bar. Now you can place it near the water, above the water, bein milamala, bein milamata, whether at a distance from that water, hovering above the water, bein milamata, or right next to the water. Bein b'teich oignoi, Rashi explains, b'teich oignoi is within the, oign is the ridge. So it has to be within the ridge, within the bar itself. So you have the water pit. It has to be within the water pit so that it's clearly focused on that water. It's for the sake of the mind. Everybody sees that we have two filling areas. It's as though the bar is split into two. So it has to be b'teich oignoi, but it can be either milamata, very close to the water, or milamala, at a distance from the water. But it has to be within the pit itself. That's the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer. It's actually machlekes between the Shammai who say Omer milamala. It is sufficient if it's within the bar, but at the top portion of the bar. But Omer milamata, no, it has to be right near the water. In any case, you have to create a mechitza. Litzorech hamayim. Now, we're speaking about a mechitza tzliya, suspended mechitza, because it's not actually splitting the water itself, not even touching the water, perhaps. It works, because here it's a mechitza trying just to create a heker, trying to create an impression of separation. So typically, Tanna Kama holds mechitza tzliya doesn't work. For instance, you have mechitza sitting on dry land. It has to actually be planted on that land to create a division in the makim. But when it comes to water, Chacham applied a kula kalhu shekilu Chacham b'mayim. Perhaps the point is that water isn't really, really walking on it, living on the water. It's not the makim that you're trying to separate. It's just the usages. You're trying to create an impression of separate usage areas within the makim, and for that purpose, we say even a suspended mechitza functions as a separator, provided that he did the mechitza specifically for this purpose and this sake, to provide a heker of separation in that water. Rabbi Yehuda, he disagrees. He says a suspended mechitza is always effective, and therefore, why do you need to construct a new mechitza in the bar? Lo yitehei mechitza Why would you consider this flimsy mechitza in your bar more effective than the kaisel? That solid wall running between the chatzeros, which happens to run over that bar and creates a separation in the bar as well. Even though it's not in the bar, it's tluya. It's riding over the bar. That's fine. Why? Explains Rashi on the second line from the top. Min ha-kaisel shebeneim, oiser hanasas lachutz ben ha-chatzeros. We're speaking about the kaisel, which is the boundary between chatzeros. Utluya al pnei ha-pia bar, which is hovering over the bar, so it runs right across that bar. That works. Va'afa b'shlei nasas b'shvil hamayim, even though it wasn't made specifically for the sake of filling water. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't care. Because savar machitza tluya materes b'chatzeros. Afilu kol tiltal. He holds that even a mechitza tluya, even a suspended mechitza up in the air, effectively divides the property beneath it. You see a separation, you see a barrier before you. Creates that mental separation, that's enough. Therefore it says, Rabbi Yehuda, don't bother making a mechitza in the bar for the water, for the milui. Forget about it. Just use that pre-existing wall running right over that bar, which effectively splits it into two. So here we have a machlekes, which is very similar to our Mishnah. Whether a suspended mechitza is effective. Rabbi Yehuda says yes, which is similar to Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah by SUKKAH. Suspended mechitza works for SUKKAH. Tanakama says no. Typically, a suspended mechitza is ineffective to create a division on the ground below. The only way it works over there is special takanos chachamim. It's a kula for the sake of filling water. Kalhu sheikilu chachamim b'mayim, as Rashi brings. Provided it was a mechitas mayim, it was specifically constructed for that purpose. That's sufficient to create that impression of separateness. I'm drawing from my side, you're drawing from yours, and we don't need an erev chatzeros, which is really based on impressions, on false impressions, right? If I carry from mine to yours, I carry from the house to the street. So as long as you create an impression of separateness, that's enough. Says the Gemara. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Let's compare the two things, erev chatzeros and sukkah. Apparently Rabbi Yehuda, who allows a suspended machitza, is b'shitas Rabbi Yossi Amra, is in line with Rabbi Yossi. The Amar machitza tluya materes, by way of by sukkah. Well, says the Gemara, perhaps there's no connection. The two things are unrelated. Lo Rabbi Yehuda savalak Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda by the bar perhaps is not going to agree with Rabbi Yossi by sukkah. And likewise, Lo Rabbi Yossi savalak Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi by sukkah perhaps won't follow Rabbi Yehuda by Shabbos. Why? Lo Rabbi Yehuda savalak Rabbi Yossi, perhaps Rabbi Yehuda by Shabbos will not concur with Rabbi Yossi by sukkah. There's a makom to be machalik. Ad kan lo kan Rabbi Yehuda hasam. Perhaps it's only over there where Rabbi Yehuda allows a suspended mechitza ela be'rubi chatzeros because it's only the rabbanon. So we allow that leniency. Aval hacha sukkah daraisa. But in our sukkah, a sukkah min haTorah, you really need a proper mechitza. A suspended mechitza is ineffective. So perhaps Rabbi Yehuda would not agree to Rabbi Yossi by sukkah. Likewise, v'lo Rabbi Yossi savalak Rabbi Yehuda. How would you know that Rabbi Yossi by sukkah would concur with Rabbi Yehuda by Shabbos? Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yossi hacha. Perhaps over here by sukkah is where Rabbi Yossi allows a suspended mechitza. Ela b'sukkah the mitzvah hasei. Sukkah only involves a mitzvah hasei. And to eat in the sukkah, it's not as severe as Shabbos. Aval Shabbos is skila. So although we're speaking about a mitzvah deraisa, but perhaps it's not as severe as Shabbos, which is the Isser Skila, because even though over there, as Rashi explains, we're not speaking about a malacha. We're only speaking about Irva Chatzeres, which of course is the Rabbanon, but perhaps since one thing can lead to the next, if you carry from one house to the other, one bird to the other, it may lead a person to actually carry from one domain to the other, which is an Isser Skila. Perhaps Chacham would not allow any sort of suspended mechitza to be employed by Shabbos. Loi. So perhaps Rabbi Yossi, even though he allows by sukkah, because it's only a mitzvah hasei, most what happens, he misses the mitzvah of sukkah, he missed out on a mitzvah hasei, didn't Isser. It's not as severe as Shabbos, which may get into Isser Skila. So perhaps he cannot allow a suspended mechitza. And therefore, says the Gemara, the two things are unrelated. Rabbi Yehuda is over there, Rabbi Yossi over here, and perhaps they don't really connect. If so, vim taimar, if that's the case, that according to Rabbi Yossi, we don't allow a mechitza tluya by anything other than sukkah, what about that story? Maasa shenasa b'tzipori, that happened in Tzipori, which was Rabbi Yossi's domain. Rashi brings the Gemara in Sanhedrin that Rabbi Yossi was the Rosh Yeshiva of Tzipori, he was the Rav. So what about that story that happened in Tzipori, where they used a mechitza tluya even on Shabbos? Al pi minasa. Who was the one who instructed them to do so? Lo yapi Rabbi Yossi. Says the Gemara, lo yapi Rabbi Yossi. No, actually it wasn't. In accordance with Rabbi Yossi's Shita, he wasn't the one who paskened. El al pi Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. What happened was Rabbi Yossi already passed away, and his son Rabbi Shmuel took over. Rabbi Shmuel agreed to them using a mechitza tluya, but not Rabbi Yossi. Umay Masa, what was that story? The Chiasur of Dimi. Rav Dimi came, Amar, he related as follows. Pam Achas, there was once a time where they forgot Shachachu v'lo hiviu Sefer Torah. Rashi explains, on account of the goyim, they would hide the Sefer Torah throughout the week. Come Erev Shabbos, they would deliver it to the shul. One week they forgot v'lo hiviu Sefer Torah Erev Shabbos. They forgot to bring the Sefer Torah before Shabbos to the shul. And now they ran into trouble because the shul was in a chutzner which had no erev. So how do they go about this? Lamachar, the next day on Shabbos, pirsa sadinin al gabi hamudim. They spread some sheets, some curtains over the poles, the posts that were situated between the home where the Sefer Torah was stored and the shul. So they created this curtained corridor between the two, which sort of shut out all the other homes, all the other residents of that chutzner, and precluded any need for Erev Chatzeris. There was this private alleyway created from the home to the shul. They viewed Sefer Torah, which allowed them to bring the Sefer Torah from house to shul. They and they read in the Sefer Torah. So that was the story. Asks the Gemara, Peres SUKKAH? Do you mean literally they brought some sheets and they hung it over the poles? How could they bring it on Shabbos? You cannot carry in this chatzor which has no erev chatzeros. Ella, rather, he must say it was motzu sadin and prusin al gavim budim. They noticed some sheets hanging over the poles. Perhaps there was some celebration a couple of days before, and there was still some sheets hanging there. And the Ritva learns they weren't really rolled down. They were just hanging there. And on Shabbos they rolled them down because it was already partially made. It had a tefach of mechitza, and you can go and add on an oil aray on Shabbos. And once they created that alleyway, they viewed Sefer Torah of a korban that allowed them to deliver the Sefer Torah and to read in it. So that was a story, and the Gemara says it was actually Rabbi Shmuel who allowed it. So even though it wasn't really a full mechitza, firmly planted on ground, it was just a suspended mechitza, it was sufficient for Shabbos carrying. Interesting, Taisus brings another girsa. In the Kasha, the Gemara asks, how could they bring the sheets? It may not carry on Shabbos. There was another girsa which went as follows. How could they spread these sheets on Shabbos? You're not meant to make an oil. You're not meant to initiate even a temporary oil on Shabbos. And Taisus brings rayas. Apparently, we find other places in other Gemaras you can go ahead and do that. Make a curtain on Shabbos. So Taisus brings the name of Rabbi Natan Chiddush. He says, creating a curtain, meaning a vertical mechitza, is also considered asiyas oil, but only provided it has prominence, it has significance. He calls it a mechitza that's moyelas lahater. And Allah it's brought down, mechitza materes. It's just a plain curtain which is not going to accomplish much, can be put up on Shabbos. But a mechitza which provides a function, provides a service, halachically provides a service, such as creating an enclosed area within the chutzah to allow carrying. Or as Taisus brings regarding sukkah. And he says the first, second, and the bit of the third wall which enable that sukkah, that's the requirements for sukkah, that's called a mechitza materes and cannot be done on Shabbos. But he says the fourth wall, the fourth wall, which isn't really necessary for sukkah, that's not called a mechitza materes. It's only a teisef as oil, and that's not really considered. So that apparently is the other pshat in the Gemara. The kasha was, how can they go ahead and actually hang these curtains on Shabbos, where they're creating an oil aray batchila, and it's an oil aray which is a mechitza materes. Well, responds by saying they didn't actually hang it up. It was pre-hung, and they just lowered it down on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara with another two examples of uncompleted walls which can be used for sukkah. Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rabbi Machzeles arba'o umashu. If you have a mat, 4 and a bit. Now, the sukkah is meant to be 7 wide and 10 high. This fellow has a mat which is 7 long. It goes from side to side of your sukkah, and it doesn't reach from floor to ceiling. It's not 10 tefachim high. It's only 4 and a bit. So in the horizontal position, it's only 4 and a bit. Says the Gemara, it works. Materes b'sukkah mishum doifen. You can use it as a wall. How can you use this incomplete wall? By strategically positioning it to employ lovet, actually a double lovet, which will stretch this 4 tefach mat for all it's worth. Heichi avid. What's he going to do? Talile be'emtza. He suspends it midair, midway, between floor to schach. Where? Pachas mishlesh lamata, within 3 to the ground. So lovet connects that. Pachas mishlesh lamala, within 3 to the schach. So lovet connects it there. Pachas mishlesh lovet dami, within 3 is considered one and connected. So again, he has a mat which is 7 tefachim long, the shear of sukkah, but only 4 and a bit wide. So he lies it down on its long side, but suspends it midway between floor and schach, within 3 to the floor, within 3 to the schach. You have a full-fledged doifen. Pshita, of course, what's the chiddush? Love it? We already know love it works. Perhaps there would be room to think chad love it amrinan. You can employ love it just once. Right? You take something and you stretch it. But trey love it to do it twice. Once on this side, once on that side. That's already going a bit too far. You're stretching something which has already been stretched. Who says? Kamashmon? Chiddush says, yeah, you can do that. Meisve, listen to this kasha. Machzeles shiva umashu. Materes besukkah mishum doifen. Here we have a machzeles, but it has to be shiva and a bit to be used for the doifen. 4 and a bit isn't enough. Kitanyahi b'sukkah g'doyla. That's speaking about a tall sukkah. Rav Chizda was speaking about a sukkah whose schach is merely 10 tefachim off the ground. In which case, if you have a mat running 7 tefachim from side to side and 4 and a bit in its height, and you place it within 3 to the ground, within 3 to the schach, which is sitting right at the 10 tefach point, you're okay. You've closed up all the gaps. He was speaking about a sukkah gedola, a tall sukkah. In which case, you can't apply the second lovet on the top of that machzelas. It's too far from the schach. You have 10 amas there. It's the only way to use this incomplete doifen, this mat, is if the mat is 7 a bit wide. So it's 7 long from right to left, and it's lying on that long side, and then you have 7 a bit in its height. If you place it within 3 to the ground, you've closed off the 2.9 on the bottom. 2.9 plus 7.1, you have your 10 tefachim. And that's a doifen, even though it's not going to reach the schach. We intend the Mishnah that as long as the mechitza rises from the ground up, asara tefachim, you're okay. Says the Gemara, "My kamashmalon," and what's the chiddush here? The meshal shlan tfanes melamala lamata. Kirab Yasi. So there are 2 girsas now, Gemara. Taisus is a girsa, which he quotes from in the name of Rashi, is that he's doing it milmata lamala, as described. He's doing it starting from the floor, working his way up. So he starts with a lovet on bottom, and then he has a 7 tefach mat to complete his 10 tefachim. The way we have the girsa in the Gemara is the other way around. The concept is the same, but the other way around. We have a mat suspended all the way up at the schach, So it's within 3 tefachim to the SUKKAH, within 2 loved, so you have 2.9 up there, plus you drop down another 7.1 for the mat itself, a total of 10. So the mat ends at the 10 tefach mark below the SUKKAH. That's enough, because you've completed your 10 tefach mechitza, despite the fact that it's coming from the top down. And that's the chiddush. Ma'ika mashmon, the meshalshlan tfanes mamal lamata, could Rabbi Yossi. Apparently, this Bryce is following Rabbi Yossi, who allows a doifen even in this manner. That's interesting. The Ritva had the first gersa that it's was speaking about a mat planted within 3 tefachim to the ground. So you have a machita which rises 10 off the ground and it stops there. And the chiddush is says the Ritva, that you can say good asik by a sukkah. See, the Ritva is the shitase. He was the one who gave that pshat in the Mishnah, that a 10 tefach high doifit isn't really sufficient on its own. You have to employ the concept of a good asik. You have to sort of stretch it up to the SUKKAH to complete that mechitza. And the chiddush of the Gemara, we're speaking about a mechitza 10 tefach off the ground, to which you can apply the good asik and extend it up to the SUKKAH. And the chiddush isn't the chiddush, even though you're already employing the loved on the bottom, right? You have a gap on the bottom, 2.9, of which you place this 7 tefach mat. So you've already applied a virtual mechitza on bottom. Still, says the Ritva, you can extend that mechitza further up with good asik all the way to the SUKKAH to complete your deif. So 2 ways to learn the Gemara. Either we're speaking about a suspended mechitza, or one placed on the ground. Either way, you're employing loved. Says the Gemara, another example of an incomplete mechitza, which works. Amar Rabbi Ami. Pas arba'a umashu mater b'sukkah. This time it's called pas. Taisus explains. Pas means a board planted on the ground. So it's not suspended mid-air like the machzelas we had earlier, but it's the pas, the board planted firmly on ground. Now, the sukkah needs to be 7 wide by 10 high. So you has this board, which is 10 tefachim high, going from floor to ceiling, but it's only 4 and a bit wide, instead of the required 7. Mater b'sukkah mishum doifen, it works. How? Provided he positions it properly. Umukim le b'pachas mishloisha tefachim samach doifen. He'll place it within 3 tefachim to the other wall. So he places it within 3 tefachim to the corner. This way it connects to that wall and creates an L-shaped sukkah. Within 3 tefachim to the other wall is one and connected. Now, what's the chiddush here? It's pretty clear, pretty obvious that it works. My kamashmon, what's he coming to teach us? Oh, kamashmon, you know what he's trying to teach us? The dimensions of a sukkah. We spoke about a sukkah being able to accommodate head, body, and table. How much is that? Hakamashmalon, shir meshach sukkah, ktana, shiva. What is the minimum size requirement for a sukkah? Length and width? 7 tefachim. So you need a pas, which is 4 and a bit, within 3 to the wall, which creates a total of a 7 tefach wall. Okay, let's do a brief chazor of today's daf. We learned that perhaps even bloi kelim are unsuitable for SUKKAH use, so even the remnants of a garment, of a kli, since it originated from a kli which is not roi, even the bloi kelim are unsuitable. We learned that, according to the Chachamim at least, the collapsed bed frame is still considered a kli. So therefore, even without the chiddush of bloi kelim being puzzle, this arucha or shnei kra'ayim or ktsara or shnei kra'ayim, the long post with 2 legs, the short post with 2 legs, would certainly be still considered SUKKAH puzzle because it's a kli in makabel tumah. We learned about a mat. If it's produced for the sake of sichuch, as opposed to for personal use, it's not a kli, it's not makabel tumah, and kosher for SUKKAH. We had the chiddush name of Huna. Although generally chotet begadish is not a sukkah, because the SUKKAH is just there by default. It wasn't man-made. Therefore, it's tasav lemin asi. But if there was a halal tefach within that haystack, that's a good starting point. A halal tefach with a area of 7 by 7, you can go ahead and enlarge that halal and finish your sukkah without any concern. And we learned about incomplete mechitzas as follows. So let's start milamata lamal. Starting point is down below. He's working his way up. We learned that if it's 10 tefachim high, it's Gavoya Yud, it works. We have two pshat in the Rishonim, either because 10 tefachim is enough on its own, or we employ good asik and we extend it upward by way of the halachah Moshe ben Sinai. We connect it to the SUKKAH in that manner. If you have a wall which is hovering within 3 tefachim to the ground, so the chitza is 7 tefachim and a bit, but positioned within 3 to the ground, that's within shir or lavud, and that works. Not only that, you can have a wall which is only 4 and a bit, as long as it's within 3 to the ground and within 3 to the SUKKAH. That also works. What about milamala lamata? He's working his way down. He's starting his daifen on top and working his way down. If he reaches within 3 to the aretz, according to all shittas, it's okay. What if it doesn't reach within 3 to the ground? So you can't connect it to the ground, but it is 10 tefachim in size. According to Tanakama, mechitzat tluya doesn't work. It has to be firmly planted on the ground below to create a barrier and a proper division, a proper mechitza, and a proper daifen for sukkah. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, even a mechitzat tluya works. So we have mechitzat tluya over here by sukkah, the name of Rabbi Yossi, and likewise you have mechitzat tluya by the boyer shemesh techatzeros, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says perhaps 2 things aren't necessarily related. We concluded with 2 unique cases of incomplete mechitzas. In the first case, we had a sukkah which was 10 tefachim high, and he suspends a mat, which is, although it is 7 tefachim long, reaches from side to side, from wall to wall, but it's merely 4.2 in height. We say it's okay because it's within reach of the SUKKAH, within reach to the ground. We apply a double lavud on top and on bottom. In the final case, we had a board which was 10 tefachim high, so it was sitting on the floor, but it was only 4 and a bit in its width. Says the Gemara, there as well. You can position it within 3 tefachim to the next wall, in which case you apply lavud, and you've completed your sukkah, because the shir of a sukkah katana is shiva tefachim. Hatzlacha Rav with you, and kol tov.